resource persons to deliver the talk for us today, and requesting all the candidates to be attentive and requesting them to type your questions, all your questions in the chat box with the name of the speaker it is directed to, and the answers will be provided at the end of all the 3 sessions. So please be patient. Based on the time, we will be taking up questions and answering, right? Now it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Maheshwar, Scientist E and Head of the Extension and Training Division, to give the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, sir.
So good morning, once again, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all for today's webinar on occasion of World Food Day. Before going to commence this program, it is my pleasure to share a few things about the today's webinar. And first and foremost, I thanks and especially welcome Dr. Lakshmaya Garu for his kind consent to share his knowledge to the webinar, and our former colleague Dr. Vasanthi, who was also kindly consented to deliver a lecture in this occasion, and Dr. Uma Chitra, my colleague working in for applied nutrition. And those 3 topics are very, very interesting. Today, I am confident that those topics, their lectures will enhance our knowledge about food security and safety. And why we are celebrating this Food Day, World Food Day? Why only on October 16th means, as all of us know, the United Nations Organization's Food and Agriculture Association, that is FAO famously called, was established on this day, that is 16th October 1945. To commemorate this day, World Food Day is celebrated every year with a new theme every year to advance global awareness and action to reduce hunger and ensure healthy diets for all. The theme this year, as just now Kiran has shared, is grow, nourish, and sustain together. Together, the word together indicates unity among us in growing ourselves, nourishing and sustaining. That has a lot of meaning, unlimited. And today's webinar on food, nutrition, safety and security is in line with this theme. And diets, as we all know, is decisive for health and nutrition status of any population. There is a natural thing. And the diversity of our country is reflected, among other things, in our food habits also. However, there are similar patterns across regions and cultures, where foods from certain food groups are consumed more like cereals, for instance, and certain foods like fruits and hardly consumed. There are various reasons for this, primary among them being economical and accessibility. The COVID-19 pandemic has put aspects of food safety and food and nutrition security in the forefront. Many segments of our society were not prepared for the onset of this new normal. Today's esteemed speakers will share their insight on these issues, and understanding of which can help us educate and create awareness and plan healthier meals. And with this, I conclude my opening remarks, and I once again welcome Dr. Lakshmaya Garu, Dr. Vasanthi, and Dr. Uma Chitra to this, and each and every one of the participants, I welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maheshwar, for this wonderful, warm welcome to everybody. Moving on, the first speaker for today is Dr. Lakshmaya, and he will be sharing his experts' insights on the topic, what we eat in India and strengthening of food systems. Dr. Lakshmaya is working as a scientist G and head in the Public Health Nutrition Division at ICMR NIN. He is also a General Secretary of the Nutrition Society of India. Over the past 25 years at NIN, he has conducted large-scale epidemiological studies, translational research, impact evaluation, and RCT trials on health and nutrition, and has over 150 publications to his credit. He has conducted many training and capacity building programs for health and nutrition functionaries of various states. He has won many prestigious awards and is presently an honorary senior research fellow in Royal Imperial College, London. Over to you, Dr. Lakshmaya, sir, for your talk.
Thank you, Kiran.
Yes.
Yeah, my slides are visible?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Another thing is, how much time is there? 30 minutes? Or?
Yeah, 25 to 30 minutes, sir.
25, 30. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So good morning, all of you. Thank you especially for Dr. Maheshwar, my friend, for giving this opportunity so to speak before you. But whatever I am speaking, may not be new for everybody. But every day we are discussing and doing the same research. But just I will highlight what are the important gaps in our dietary intakes, especially in India. So as yeah. As we know, the World Food Day. So World Food Day, 16th every year, 16th October, we are celebrating. And this was started in 1945 by FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, in the UN meeting on food and agriculture. And the UN meeting, they decided that we should have a World Food Day on the birth of FAO. Actually, it is a birth of FAO day. It's a Food and Agriculture Organization. So then the today's this year, what is the theme of the FAO or this World Food Day? The grow, nourish, sustain, and together. And already Kiran and Dr. Maheshwar already spoke about this theme. And this is the actually FAO released the banner. So the theme banner, and this is the very nicely designed, and they released recently for everyone to understand what is the actual theme of this year. And what are the objectives? What are the objectives?
Slideshow, please, sir.
Hello.
Slideshow, please.
Then it is already slideshow.
Sir, full screen, sir, please.
It is okay
Yeah.
now.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the main objectives of the World Food Day. So to raise public awareness, what we are doing now, and focus of food security and dissemination of food systems information. So a comprehensive information we have to disseminate to the all stakeholders. Here many stakeholders are there. So the food system starts with farm to fork, farm to. So when we eat, so that is it is a large subsystems also involved in the food systems, and we have to disseminate what are the gaps are there, what are the achievements are there in each system, what are the best practices in the food system. This is the occasion to share. Then mobilize public opinion and funds in favor of global fight against hunger. So everywhere, it may be district, it may be state, it may be country, or it may be global regions. So everyone should also mobilize public opinion and funds in favor of global fight against hunger. So the grow, nourish, and sustain together. Grow, we know that we have to produce sufficient food grains. So the country should be self-sustenance. That is Atmanirbhar Bharat. So in all aspects. So even in production, we have, as you are know, in the production, we achieved all self-sustainability. So we are the more than 275 metric tons, lakhs of metric tons we are producing. The whole grains are sufficient. We are number one in fish culture. We are number one in milk production. We are second in pulse production. We are second in vegetable and fruits. So we have achieved in India the self-sufficiency in most of the things, except to some extent oils, and even some extent we are importing even pulses also. Even though we are second in producing, but still because of population, we need more and more. So these are the facts, actually global facts, and FAO released facts on the occasion of this World Food Day. So more than 2 billion people do not have regular access to nutritious and sufficient food, and 14% of food we are wasting because during the systems. So intensified food production combined with climate change is causing a rapid loss of biodiversity. Currently, only 9 planet species account for 66% of total food crop production. Actually, we have the species, 3,400 species are there, food species, the plant species. But mostly we are depending on only 9 plant species. So that's what, because the diversity is not here. We are not seeing much of the diversity. So 135 million people across 55 countries experience acute hunger, requiring urgent food, nutrition, and livelihood assistance. So if our food systems are not transformed, undernourishment and malnutrition will greatly increase by 2050. So the consequences could worsen due to income inequality, unemployment, and poor access to services. So poor diet and sedentary lifestyles. This is also one of the important, and today we stress on this, and lead to soaring obesity rates, not only in developed countries, but also low income countries like India and other countries, where hunger and obesity also coexist. Both are, no region is exempt for this. So the global population is expected to reach almost 10 billion by 2050, significantly increasing the demand for the food by 2050. So according to the population growth, and our food production also should be increased in all foodstuffs, not only 2-3 foodstuffs, all foodstuffs we have to increase. And more than 3 billion people in the world lack access to internet, and most of them in rural and remote areas. Smallholder farmers need greater access to innovation, technology, finance, training, improve their livelihoods. So these are the main challenges are in front of us. So we have to achieve all these challenges, and in order to get the food for all. So the global challenges, you can see, if you see the morbidity, mortality at global level, these are the challenges. 2 billion people lack micronutrient deficiencies like iron, vitamin A, zinc. Okay, so 155 male children are stunted, but unfortunately, India contributing 1/3 of the children. So almost 46 million children are stunted in India. And 52 million children are wasted. So 2 billion adults are overweight and obese. 41 million children are overweight, and 88% of countries suffering from one or two kind of these diseases. So if you come to the nutrition challenges in India, so we are facing triple burden of disease: protein energy malnutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, and diet related chronic diseases. NCD is also very high in India. So the India is the global center for obesity. So the burden of malnutrition among, if you see the numbers, you can see stunting. Just now I told 46 million children are suffering from stunting. As per this 2016 CNNS survey, the CNNS survey was carried out Ministry of Health and UNICEF and most and many national organizations, even NAN also one of the collaborating center, and 72 million diabetics are in India. But this also now the estimations are showing that this will also increase, and even we can beat China in this diabetes number. And overweight obesity in adults, 166 million, anemia 447 million people are anemic, and the anemia prevalence or anemia morbidity is not following any socio-economic gradient also. Even richest people also suffering from anemia, most of the people. And the use of the ugly face of hidden hunger, the micronutrient deficiency. Just now we are discussing iron deficiency, folic acid deficiency, vitamin A deficiency, iodine deficiency, zinc deficiency, even B12 deficiency. So the prevalence of overweight obesity, this is according to NNMB surveys, National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau. This survey was carried out in 16 states, and the details are discussed later. So here we have central, east, north, northeast, south, and west. This is the full figures you can see. So abdominal obesity is very, very high among urban population. Almost out of 2 people, 1 person is suffering from abdominal obesity. In everywhere, almost all regions, except central little less, but almost all it is 50% of people are suffering from abdominal obesity. So then overweight obesity also very high. If you put together overweight and obesity, more than almost 50% of people also suffering from overweight obesity. And even rural area also it is compared to be less, but there is a significant increasing in overweight obesity in the rural, among the rural population also. So the hypertension, we are discussing with the CVD, even hypertension prevalence among in India, urban, rural. So even though there is a urban population, the prevalence is very high compared to rural, but in both the population groups, it was significantly high. You can see the prevalence of abdominal obesity and this already discussed, and the prevalence of diabetes, you can see. So diabetes also very high, almost 25% in urban, and 7 to 8% among rural population. So the relation between BMI and cardiovascular mortality, you can see that we are discussing with overweight obesity. So it is a J-shaped curve. So overweight obesity, if it is a BMI is less, also a problem. BMI is over, also a BMI high, also is a problem. Risk of mortality is very high, and we have to keep BMI between 18.5 to less than 25. Then only we can avoid the risk. So we have done one important, how diets are important. You can see for overweight obesity, and this was published long back, but you can see the contribution of diet. Even diet alone contributing 53% of contribution is coming from only what we are eating. So because of the unhealthy diet, we are contributing 50% of overweight obesity, and the causes of overweight obesity other than diet maybe only 47%. So that says that how important is the diet. So what are the determinants of this risk factor, NCDs? Common risk factor modifiable is one of the most important is unhealthy diet. So unhealthy diet leads to obesity, dyslipidemia, then tobacco, alcohol consumption, then physical activity help in developing all these. These are the intermediate risk factors: high lipids, high blood pressure, high blood glucose, overweight, obesity.
Sir, you're not audible, sir.
Sir, you are muted, sir.
Oh, it is there now. Hello.
Now it's working, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
sir, working.
Right. So here intermediate risk factors. This is this if you unable to prevent here, so this will result into a disease. So CVD, diabetes, and chronic respiratory disorders, and some of the gastrointestinal cancers. You can see. Okay, so the common risk factor is the diet-related non-communicable. These are all diet-related non-communicable disease. So the diet is, you can see, unhealthy diets. It leads to cardiovascular, diabetes, and cancer. So then, regardless of who the father of a disease is, surely its mother is improper diet. So diet is very, very important as per the Chinese proverb. So eat for your DNA. So nowadays the phenotypic changes. You can see that if your diet is unhealthy diet, and chronic and continuous mutations lead to your gene also. So the hereditary factors also will change. So Asian Indian genes are loaded guns, and trigger is bad lifestyles. Bad lifestyles is one of the heating of unhealthy diet is also a bad lifestyle. So you are loaded guns. So Asian Indians are loaded guns, and your bad lifestyles leads to this all non-communicable diseases. So factors affecting lifestyles, very important is what we eat. So the way we are born, the way we are grown, the food what we eat, this is also decides your lifestyle and your lifestyle diseases. So the changes observed in the intake of legumes and vegetables, milk, fats, and oils, especially in animal fat consumption. So this is the transition. So we are facing nutrition transition, we are facing demographic transition, nutrition transition, epidemiological transition, but today we are focusing on nutrition transition. So substitution of millets by more prestigious, often highly polished cereals such as rice and PDS. So because of this 1 rupee rice and other schemes, the spoiled the dietary diversity of the, especially among rural population and tribal population. Reduction in cereal intake is observed over a time. Changes observed in dietary fat N3 N6 ratio due to higher intake of cheap commercial vegetable oils, that is N6 fatty acids, especially this oils. No? So the oils, most of the oils are N6 fatty acids. So low fruit vegetable intake in rural communities, increased intake of sugar sweetened water beverages in semi-urban and urban areas, a significant reduction in physical activity leading to overweight, obesity. So one of the multiple disease relationships, we can see beneficial and harmful effects of specific dietary fats. Therefore, for fat is also essential, but limitation of fat is also important. The estimation of fat consumption levels are essential for quantifying its impact on burden of diseases. Although fatty acids significant roles in many functions, but accumulation of excess fat adipose tissue is a major risk factor for NCDs. Rather than quantify fat, the type of fat consumed is very important, and consumption of omega-3 fatty acids is very important. So, and this is also very important. I like this slide very much because here you can see the fetal origins of adult chronic diseases like Dr. Barker hypothesis. So, suppose if the child is suffer in nutritionally during intrauterine life, so the effects are very severe, and the onset of adult chronic disease is very early in the age of around some 20 to 30, 40 years at a young adult age. So you can see that the trends of these morbidities, you can see communicable diseases are reducing and non-communicable diseases are increasing. The more than we have reached 50% of contribution is from non-communicable diseases. And this is also what are the root cause for all these? These are the root causes: physical inactivity, unhealthy diet, and smoking for all these communicable diseases. So even recently Lancet publication also, you can see global 6 factors driving the global disease of children are nutrition and diet. You can see these are all green are 6. So the contribution is all the morbidity, the global burden of disease. If you analyze, you can see the major contribution is diet. So that is child maternal nutrition, dietary risk, and high systolic blood pressure. And these are also related to your diet. And even DALIs last, even 7 out of 17 DALIs also because of nutrition. So how importance diet is revealing these slides. So what are the preventive strategies are available to prevent these things? One is again diet and behavior therapy and physical activities. Physical activity, diet is one of the important thing for modification of lifestyles and improve the health. So here WHO targets, this is the targets you can see. We have to reduce premature mortality from NCDs 25% reduction, raised blood pressure 25%, tobacco 30%, salt reduction 30%, physical inactivity 20%, obesity 0. At least we can unable to reduce the obesity, but stop the obesity to increase. Fat intake 15%, alcohol 20%, raised cholesterol, and generic medicine and technologies 80%, drug therapy and counseling 50%. Here most of the things are diet related challenges, and diet places what is the ideal diet? This is the ideal diet. The whatever calories we are getting should get to 55 to 60% only from carbohydrate. Then fat should be less than 35%. Protein should be 12 to 15% calories. If this ratio reverse, the unhealthy diet. So but what we are eating presently, you can see in developing countries like India, 60 to 70%, 70 to 75%, and fat 5 to 20%, and 8 to 12%. So even protein also less we are eating. So that what is the healthy diet constitutes? So these are the, all are aware of. This is a very simple slide. Energy giving foods, body building foods, and fiber foods, and protective foods. Combination is very, very important to these combination of food should be there in your plate. So this is the ideal plate of what we should eat. So the 1/4 of protein and one half of the things your plate should be either fruits and vegetables, and starch only should be 1/4. So the types of millet, these are the very important healthy foods, and several millets are available in India, but unfortunately the consumption is not like that. You can see. So the what Indians eat, recently this report is inaugurated by, released by Honorable Health Minister Dr. Harshavardhan, and in the presence of DG and our director Hemalata. And we thanks to our director Dr. Hemalata, and she has taken a keen interest on producing this report, and of course everybody helped. But Dr. Hemalata, she is the very lead person in this development of this report. This is very useful report, and it was available in the, it is available in the NIN website. You can, everybody, you can get it, download, and you can read even leisurely. So in this document, I am presenting what are the salient findings in this document and how these can help, and we have identified some of the gaps. So the diet, as you know, the diet plays a crucial role in determining the health and nutritional status of the population. The dietary diversity is determined by several factors, as personal factors, behavioral factors, and environmental factors. Thus, we have analyzed the NNMB dietary data into region-wise food consumption and micronutrient intake, and contribution of different food groups to energy, protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Previously, just before this, we discussed what is the contribution of energy from these proximate nutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So the proportion of population consuming energy obtained from various food groups is my plate for the day recommendations. So this is also Dr. Hemalata, our director, she developed this my plate for the day based on NNMB data and other available dietary consumption levels, and what should be the ideal meal. So the prevalence of obesity, hypertension disease was estimated by each region based on NNMB, and the region-wise information and dietary consumption in terms of food groups and essential for developing an appropriate region-specific food-based strategies for tackling the triple burden of malnutrition in India with diverse cultural and food behavior practices. So this report can help for policymakers to develop strategies for intervention for a good healthy dietary habits. So dietary data analysis of urban and rural India, macronutrient intakes based on household 24 dietary recall method. And these are the, in urban area, in each person is consuming, especially adult man is consuming 1943 kilocalories per day. And so this is the fat and 55.4 grams of protein. So in rural region, an average adult consumed 2081. So rural population generally consume more calories compared to urban population, because the rural population is, most of the people are moderate and activities more. So the total energy intake, cereals contributed in 998 kilocalories, while visible fats and pulse legumes contributing 265 kilocalories and 119 kilocalories per day. So this we have to apply how this, whether they are following a healthy food model or not. So then whereas milk and milk products contributed energy almost similar in urban, there is no much difference from urban and rural area. And milk and milk products only 9% in rural, 12% in population in urban areas consumed as per the recommended intakes. So only 9% of the population in rural and 17% of the urban areas consumed vegetables as per the recommended intake, while 22% in rural, 27% in urban areas consumed the recommended dietary intakes of nuts and oil seeds. So the report present for the first time this energy contribution and proportion of population consuming more than recommended intakes of cereals was 97% in rural and 67% in rural areas. So what we discussed earlier, so the cereal contribution of the energy should be around 55 to 50 to 55%, and the more contribution is coming most of the population in rural and even urban also, the energy contribution from carbohydrates is more. So this is not a good habit, or this will not comes under a healthy diet. So the proportion of population consuming recommended more than 66% of protein from pulses, legumes, nuts, and the level of good quality of protein was only 5% among rural, 18% among urban population. Some extent even pulses, the pulses or protein requirement is meeting, but the quality of protein is also very important. Low consumption of fruits and vegetables and low intake of milk and milk products increased the risk of hypertension. So this is the My Plate developed by Dr. Hemalata and a group of colleagues. So here you can see this should be the ideal intake, and the plate also you can see just what we discussed earlier is almost similar. The 50% is fruits, vegetables and everything, and 1/4 is cereals and other things, nuts and other things also there. And the NNMB, just now we are speaking on NNMB. This is the NNMB National Monitoring Reserve, but it was not live presently, but it was closed due to some administrative reasons. And the sampling procedure are this, because we can also read in the reports are available detailed sampling procedure for rural and urban and tribal population. So this is the tribal survey, this is the urban survey sampling design. So we have covered 16 states and then state capitals and other 4 cities and some selected wards, and this is the detailed sampling procedure. So these are the north, central, east. We have divided the regions, 6 regions. The mean household intake of green leafy vegetables, you can see the green leafy vegetables, except a few states and most of the states, the consumption is very, very low. You can see Kerala, Andhra Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, even including, but here Andhra Pradesh is inclusive of Telangana. So that is a combined Andhra Pradesh figures. And even this vegetables, other vegetables also, the consumption is very low in some of the states. So these are the details. You can see the intake of cereals and millets and the proportion of contribution of millets. This is 100%, and this much percent is cereal contribution quantity wise. And energy wise, you can see this is the energy wise and contribution, but in urban area, the energy is okay. Contribution is 51 is okay. Protein and this fat and carbohydrates. You can read these slides. I can give these slides so you can read leisurely. So all information is useful. Information is there. How to form a healthy diet, and we have also shown this. Contribution of what is the, you can see most of the cereals and millets in east and northeast is very, very high consumption of cereals and millets. So millets is less, but cereals is very high, and here even fat intake is also very high, and that is also correlating with the high hypertension, diabetes and other morbidities along with this food. So this is a rural scenario. Same here, 394 cereals and maximum contribution from cereals here. If you take the quantity wise and contribution of energy 65%, it is more than what we recommending in the My Plate and as well as even WHO, even global guidelines also. So here also you can see the most of the cereals and millets in especially in south and west and everywhere the rural population is very, very high. The contribution of cereals is very, very high. The quantity of cereal consumption is also very high compared to other regions. So intake of reference distribution of protein. So earlier we discussed the protein intake. You can say what is the requirement, what is the rural intake, what is the urban intake. So this is the requirement and we are not reaching the requirement. The density, you can see the density is only here, just a little better urban population, but rural population is the quality of protein is very, very less. And here the fat intake, you can see fat intake is very, very high. You can see visible fat and fat from food. So both together it is reaching very, very high. Our visible fat should be only 20 grams, but here the consumption is even very high, especially in urban population and even rural population also high. So the criteria for assessing recommended intake, just now we discussed the cereal should be 45%. This is ice per my plate. So the ice per my plate, it is not, fortunately, the consumption is over a period of time, it is reducing a step ladder pattern gradually. You can see in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, even in Rajasthan and some other states also, those where the consumption is very high previously, then almost all poor population and below poverty line people are consumed these foods. Now they forgot to consume here. Now rich people are consuming, some few rich people are consuming. So it was a poor man diet. Actually, millets is a poor man diet upon a time, but now it become a rich man diet because of its healthy characters and other things. So we have also just class analyzed this intake of milk and milk products and risk of hypertension. Those families taking a high amount of milk, and those individuals are taking high amount of milk and milk products, the risk of hypertension is lower compared to other people. As well as fruits and vegetables also, the risk of diabetes is lower when the quantity of fruits and vegetables is increasing. So the in conclusion, so what India eats, the differences depending on the cultural practices. Large proportion of population was consuming high quantity of cereals and consuming less protective foods such as legumes, milk, nuts, vegetables, fruits. In the urban region of North India, fat intake was the highest, and overweight, obesity, abdominal obesity was also highest. In North India, consumed the highest calories and carbohydrates per day. High proportion of people with hypertension also suffering, and low consumption of vegetable fruits increased to risk of diabetes, and low intake of milk and products is a risk of hypertension. The dietary data clearly showing these risk ratios. And this is for the even FAO statement, they given that during this pandemic situation, it is more important to support our food heroes, that farmers and workers throughout the food system, and treat them with dignity and respect. So farmer safety through appropriate safety measures across the food and farm supply chains must be ensured, just as for the frontline health workers. How we are giving incentives to frontline health workers, and the farmers also should get those kind of protective measures and incentives, because they are also working in the field continuously, and such solutions will help build back better and improved food systems that are more resistant to shocks and have better nutritional outcomes. So we can all contribute to this endeavor by supporting the government, other organizations working to ensure continuous food availability and food supply to the most vulnerable communities. So here not only government can work, and all stakeholders and development partners, everybody should work for this goal. So the most of the gaps in the eat right is due to ignorance about healthy food, and more education and dissemination programs may be conducted. Here, even literate people also illiterate in nutrition knowledge. The spreading of nutrition knowledge and dissemination of nutrition knowledge is more important. Now we are not saying nutrition knowledge, nutrition literacy we are demanding, and we are promoting nutrition literacy, especially the extension and training division should take up this as a priority. Nutrition literacy, improvement of nutrition literacy in India. So ensure that sustainable food systems deliver healthy diets for the poor and everyone. So then only we can get the, because we have the demographic dividends. So you might be heard demographic dividends. Once the people are healthy, then only we can get a real demographic dividend, because young population is more in India. And the advertisement, unfortunately, advertisement about healthy foods is very low. So those who are unhealthy foods, the advertisement is plenty. So this should be reversed. The graph should be reversed. Then only the people awareness will be increased and other things. So here, this slide also I like very much. So you do not have to eat less. You just have to eat right food. So this is the major important advice or motivate people to take up these messages. And traditional food is very, very important. And this our plate should be colorful, not artificial food colors. This is a natural food colors. Definitely, you will get the balanced diet if you eat. Your plate is always colorful. So the functional foods is a wonder food. So they contain vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, hormones, N3 fatty acids. Because we are lack of N3 fatty acid, we are not maintaining N6 and N3 fatty acids. If you include your diet, all these things you will get. The take-home message is uh, less consume fat, sugar, salt, and fruits and vegetables and dietary fiber. And this is increase the fruits and vegetable, dietary fiber, physical activity, and drink plenty of water. So healthy life, it is a long journey. So we have to, sorry. So this is a long journey. We have to travel miles and miles. And thank you for the prevention is better than cure. So prevention is the healthy diet. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity once again. And thank you everyone to in this webinar.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank Dr. Lakshmaya for giving us a bird's eye view of what we grow and its impact on our food and macronutrient consumption pattern across the various states as well as urban and rural populations. And also he touched about the risk of obesity with consumption of an unhealthy diet. So the key is to take a diversified diet, which includes a higher consumption of fruit, vegetables, and millets. And all of us have a role to improve at various levels and strata of the population to improve our health and reduce the risk of NCDs and other diseases. Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. Moving on, I take the privilege to call on the speaker of the day, Dr. Vasanthi, who will take us through food safety, emerging challenges in a changing environment. Dr. Vasanthi is a senior scientist who worked in ICMR NIN from 1987 to 2020 in the field of food safety and toxicology research. She is a recognized expert in the area of food safety and mycotoxins research and was involved in the FAO roster for food additive, contaminants, and natural toxicants. She is a resource person for capacity building in food safety, which includes risk assessment and management of food safety standards, hazards, developing dietary exposure approaches for assessing food contaminant exposure, evolving rapid methods of detection in the food chain, developing preventive and control strategies for risk reduction from various food contaminants. Currently, she is working as an independent consultant on food safety to various international food safety collaborative research programs of the WHO and MRC UK, serving as an advisor to the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, FSSAI, member and co-chair of Codex Committee on Contaminants in Foods on food safety risk assessment and policy development and setting of tolerance limits for mycotoxin. Welcome, Dr. Vasanthi.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm indeed very grateful for providing me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on emerging food safety challenges. And in that, I'm indeed grateful to Dr. Maheshwar, head of the Extension Division, and his team, and of course to Dr. Sylvia for inviting me in this important event. So today is a very important day for each one of us and for the global population, the World Food Day. And it is, I'll be talking about the food safety aspects because food safety is a very important component of food issue. So I'll be talking about certain emerging challenges in a changing environment. So how does this happen? From where do these emerging challenges appear? in the post-WTO era, it is World Trade Organization era, food had become the most regulated commodity worldwide, and food safety was the central theme in all regulatory frameworks of various countries as well as at international regulatory levels. So, over the past decades, we have witnessed rapid technological advancements and the booming food industry. On one hand, these advancements have facilitated food availability, facilitated food safety to a certain extent. But on the other hand, they also brought along various food safety challenges, which safety issues, which have become constantly evolving. That is, these challenges were constantly evolving along with the rapid changing food system environment. So, in fact, the current scenario of COVID pandemic, the food safety importance has suddenly enhanced. And there is more awareness on food safety issues, and people are opting to eat food at home, fresh food, and try to stay away from any food safety risk in the food chain. So I'll be talking about some of these emerging challenges, and starting with the basic food safety. So as defined by the World Health Organization, so it is a scientific discipline describing handling, preparation, and storage of foods in ways that prevent foodborne illness. So this will include all the routines that should be followed to avoid potentially severe health hazards. And food safety encompasses all the actions aimed at ensuring that food is as safe as possible at every stage in the food production and processing chain. Now, food safety has become a public health priority, a public health concern, because it is always the poor, the underprivileged, and the undernourished who take the brunt of the deleterious effect of food contamination. And the ill health and undernutrition, undernourished population always take the end result of the twin burdens of lack of adequacy and nutritive quality, along with the presence of food contamination. Just now, Dr. Lakshmaya was talking about the importance of the food adequacy, the nutrient adequacy. So hence, the ensuring the wholesomeness of food would contribute to the promotion of health and nutrition and ensure its adequacy and nutritive value. Now, closely linked with food safety are food hygiene, which are the conditions and measures necessary to ensure the safety and suitability of food at all stages of the food chain. Now, food hygiene has suddenly or is receiving the maximum attention in the current scenario, because the maintenance of food hygienic conditions is extremely important in the food chain, in the food market, particularly in the wet food market, which is being highlighted as the main source for the infections such as the coronavirus. Then food quality, which are the attributes influencing the product value to the consumer, are also important, because very often poor quality food is also also contains various food contaminants. Food safety is also a critical component of food security, which will be more will be spoken by the next speaker. So here, from the perspective of food safety, the food security, among other things, includes access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, which meets the dietary needs and food preferences for active and healthy life. Now, various food safety hazards are now globally recognized and well documented. The health hazards produced by exposure to these food safety risks have also been well documented. So among them, the biological hazards and the chemical hazards receive the most global attention and concern. The biological hazards are the infectious bacteria, the toxin-producing organisms, parasite, viruses, and so on. The chemical hazards are the toxicants, both naturally occurring or those coming from agrochemicals. Veterinary drug residues, particularly important, various environmental contaminants, as well as chemical contaminants through packaging. And allergens are suddenly gaining a lot of attention in the current scenario. So various foodborne pathogens are of concern. There are some persisting ones and emerging ones. The persisting ones continue to threaten our food chain, particularly the Salmonella and E. coli species, as well as Staphylococcus and Bacillus aureus, which are frequently the causes of various food poisoning incidents in India. But on the other hand, we have the emerging foodborne pathogens. The Clostridium species, Shigella, and Vibrio species are showing increasing involvement in food poisoning incidents in the Indian context. And suddenly there is an interest in viruses, particularly the hepatitis A virus, rotavirus, enterovirus, adenovirus, which are various food-sourced viruses, and various parasites are gaining a lot of attention. So food poisoning incidences from pathogenic bacteria in India have been documented recently. Majority have been shown to occur from traditional bacterial pathogens like Bacillus cereus, Staphylococcus aureus, Vibrio species, and E. coli. The threat from emerging pathogens, which I have just spoken, causing listeriosis and shigellosis, have been recently reported from Kerala, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Rajasthan. Listeria monocytogenes from dairy products, meat and fishery products, and Shigella species from rice, potato, lentils, and water have been documented as the main causes for these outbreaks. Very often, meat and meat products or animal foods are involved in many of the foodborne disease outbreaks, and to a certain extent, rice preparations. And food handlers have been now endorsed as a major contributing factor in the causation of foodborne diseases. The persisting threat of chemical hazards, we have mycotoxins, which have a long-standing history right from the Middle Ages, but they continue to threaten our food supply, and there is global concern for these group of toxins. The aflatoxins are the most important group of toxins among this group of toxins. Cyanogenic glycosides, particularly those in cassava, which is used as a staple food in African countries. Pyrrolystine alkaloids, which are a group of chemicals particularly detected in herbal products exported from developing countries. Environmental contaminants like arsenic are receiving a lot of attention. Arsenic in rice. Recently, the Codex Alimentarius Commission, the International Food Safety Standard Setting Body, has established maximum limits for arsenic in rice. And lead is particularly important from spices point of view, as well as cadmium and methyl mercury in fish. Use of food additives has enormously increased because of the rapidly developing food industry. Of particular importance have been coloring agents. The use of non-permissible colors is still persisting, and various preservatives and other additives that are required for the technological process are increasing in recent times. Food contact material has received is gaining a lot of interest, particularly in developed countries. So there are a lot of specifications and food safety standards for important food contact materials to keep their migration into the food as low as possible. Among the food allergens, those coming from tree nuts, ground nuts, and fish are the ones of concern. Pesticide residues continue to threaten our food supply. Veterinary drug residues and antimicrobial resistance are the two areas, group of chemical hazards that are gaining international attention. So I would just like to talk a little bit about the threat of mycotoxins in food, because 4 major acute toxicity outbreaks have been documented in India, although they have not occurred recurred? We do not know, because very often these outbreaks are underreported. Even various other foodborne disease outbreaks are underreported. Aflatoxins continue to receive the global attention. We have several documented health effects on this particular toxin. But the emerging concern of aflatoxin exposure is its association that is being slowly identified with growth impairment or stunting in young children. So the studies are now being initiated in India. Fumonisin and deoxynivalenol, the other two mycotoxins, are important because of their synergistic action with aflatoxins, particularly in causing growth impairment among children. These are being investigated actively. So coming to the global burden of foodborne disease. So we have looked at the food hazards, but what is the burden? How are we faced at that angle? So the WHO, most of you must be aware, has conducted an assessment of the global disease burden from foodborne hazards by investigating 31 important foodborne hazard risks, which have shown to cause disease 600 million foodborne illnesses and 420,000 deaths in 2010. Among these diarrheal agents, disease agents, particularly the norovirus and Campylobacter species, as well as enteropathogenic E. coli and Vibrio cholerae, were the most frequent and leading causes of foodborne diseases, followed by Salmonella species, the Taenia solium, hepatitis A virus, and aflatoxin. But 40% of this burden was among children under 5 years old, indicating that this is the most vulnerable group for that is exposed to any kind of food safety risk. And of course, the African, Southeast Asian, and Eastern Mediterranean region have the highest foodborne disease burden. This is just a crowded slide, but then it's just to show you all that diarrheal disease agents top the list of foodborne disease burden, as you can see in the figures. What about the foodborne disease burden in India? A recent study by Kristova et al. In 2017 estimated that the foodborne disease burden in the year 2011 from combined sources of diarrheal, parasitic, and chemical hazards is 100 million cases per year. 1 in 12 people get affected. And they also predicted the foodborne disease burden in 2030 from now. There would be a rise from 100 million to, I can't see this. 1 out of 9 people on average fall sick, which is an increase from the current figures. The Ministry of Health's Integrated Disease Surveillance Program conducts these, estimates the foodborne disease burden, especially from the number of food poisoning outbreaks and acute diarrheal disease outbreaks. These were more than 2,000 to 4,000 during 2000. Karen, can you please remove this? I'm not able to see my slide. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, can you just remove this? I'm not able to see my slide.
You would have to remove what, ma'am? Can you minimize it to yourself? Can you try?
Yeah. Okay, no, I can't. Because the one end I'm not able to see.
Vasante, that automatically comes. You have to just move.
Okay, fine. So, especially the foodborne disease outbreak incidences are high in places where food is where there is a community cooking or large-scale cooking takes place. But what are the economic implications? These are very important to assess for prioritizing health risks, prioritizing the foodborne disease risk, as well as allocation of resources to control the foodborne diseases. So foodborne diseases cost India about $28 million, or around 0.5% of the country's gross domestic product every year, as revealed by the Kristova study. And earlier, on the basis of per capita income, the economic disease burden on people in India as affected by an outbreak from Staphylococcus aureus poisoning was found to be higher than in the case of a similar outbreak in the USA. So the changing food safety environment, what are the challenging issues? I just listed out some of these, but there are many issues which vary from region to region. In the developing country region, they are different, and in the developed countries, these are different. The most important is the increase in international food trade, both in food volume as well as diversity, which has really opened the gates for various food safety risks. Then changing agriculture practices, adopting new technologies for food production. Climate change impacts are the most discussed in international circles now. Then emerging concerns of food fraud. Earlier we talked about food adulteration, but food fraud is gaining enormous dimensions, both in developed and developing countries. Then the increasing trends in zoonotic virus-related diseases, as we are now witnessing the COVID pandemic. Changing consumer behavior, preference, and habits. The consumer demand for more safe food, consumer demands for diverse variety of foods is also causing a challenging food safety issue. Then there is enhanced development of sophisticated detection methods for food contaminants. So you're able to detect various food contaminants at very, very low levels so that you know that whether the contaminant has decreased in the food or not. So new food chain technologies, there's increased demand for functional foods, nutraceuticals. So there are issues of safety of raw materials, the processing methods, and safety assessment methodology for this particular class of technology-derived foods. Then increased recognition and adoption of whole food chain approach for food safety management. Although this is a very viable approach, the complexities of food chain management, the food chain operations in developing countries makes it very difficult to plan a framework for whole food chain approaches. So how the increase in international food trade is impacting the food safety system? Because this has suddenly come from after the WTO was introduced, because WTO also demands food safety measures, food safety standards from member countries, and it recognizes the international food safety standards established by the Codex. Sometimes countries can establish their own food safety standards. For example, the European Union, by adopting the concept of precautionary principle, which is available in the WTO technical barriers to trade agreement, as well as the sanitary measures agreement. So meeting the demands of stringency in food safety regulations of developed countries are really, developed countries are difficult, are posing several challenges. So what happens is when the developing countries exports its value-added foods to the developed countries, and because it's unable to meet the stringency in food safety regulations, they are rejected, and the rejected consignments are once again circulated in the domestic food supply chain, thus increasing the risk of exposure to food safety hazards in the exporting countries. Also, the capacity to sustain exports, value-added exports of value-added items will be a great source of revenue, foreign exchange revenue for the developing country. To sustain such exports is also a challenging task to in the developing countries, because the capacity, particularly to comply with the food safety regulations, is again invites a lot of resources, and particularly financial resources. So these in way affect the food safety system, and the exposure again to food safety hazards potential increases. So this is an example to show you the European Union rapid alert system for food and feed notifications for all imported food commodities. So among the various hazard categories that the European Union identifies, pathogenic microorganisms receive the maximum number of notifications. So when they are beyond the safety standards set up by the developed country, they are rejected and sent back to the country. This is followed by mycotoxins. And the product category of nuts, nut products and seeds are the most often rejected category, as well as fruits and vegetables that show high levels of pesticides, microorganisms, as well as mycotoxins. Changing agriculture practices, food production challenges, and entry of genetic engineering technology and GE crops. A lot of resistance has been met with the genetically engineered or genetically modified crops when they were introduced in various other countries, particularly in developed countries. But still, in India, we have only BT cotton. No GM food crop has yet been approved. The GM food crops entry was again based on the scenario of food availability and food security against the diminishing resources, land resources. So we have the various biotic and abiotic stresses that are affecting food availability, foods with reduced nutritive value, again, that fail to meet our nutrition security, and of course, foods contaminated, again, food safety problems would make the food unavailable to the population. In order to reduce these effects, the genetic engineering technology was introduced that can very selectively facilitate the plants to grow under stress conditions, and also introduce enhanced nutritive benefits through this particular technology, as well as increase the shelf life of foods and reduce toxicants and allergens. So that is the way these crops were introduced into the market. But then, along with benefits of higher crop yields, less use of pesticides, nutritional processing, and shelf life improvement, they were equally balanced with concerns of toxicity, allergenicity, nutritional effects, gene transfer, and unintentional effects. And beyond all this, the safety assessment methodology of these GM crops before they can be released for human consumption were received a lot of interrogations, because the scientific evidence on toxicity and health risks, the sensitivities of methodologies for risk assessment, and the genetic effects of the entire technology are yet unknown. There is still limited knowledge regarding these aspects. So these have been approved in certain nations like the United States, as well as the European Union, which don't cultivate the GM crops, but then they do market the GM crops, and a small section of the populations do consume these crops. Climate change effects. Coming to the food safety impacts of climate change, the temperature and precipitation extremes are the most important factors, because these have been shown to increase pathogen load. Then warmer temperature can result in greater food spoilage. This is a well-known fact. Even this fact, we observe this even in our homes. Warmer temperature always results in food spoilage if it is not stored under refrigerated temperature. So these kind of extreme climate events can disrupt food supply and food distribution. So the main drivers of climate change are environmental pollution through air, water, and soil. So these pollutions can be biological, chemical, and physical in nature, which enter the food supply and again cause contamination. So the climate change effects on food security and nutrition are again linked to the effects on food safety and public health, as you can see from this graphic slide, because each one is connected. So unless the food is safe, you cannot have a food security or food availability. And unless there is a nutrition security, the food available food will have limited value. So the change in temperature and precipitation patterns and intensity of extreme weather events are main impacts of climate change. And these are largest contributors to the global burden of food-related diseases, as well as mortality, including undernutrition and communicable and non-communicable diarrheal and vector-borne diseases. The Climate change impact mainly they affect the persistence and occurrence of bacteria, viruses, parasites, etc., and the patterns of the corresponding foodborne diseases and the risk of uh, toxic contaminants. If you look at the climate change impacts on foodborne pathogens, so it is being observed that there's an increased bacterial, viral, and pathogenic contamination of water and food through altering the features of survival and transmission patterns because of these changes in the climate. Pathogens with low infective doses, like enteric viruses or parasites, and are more likely to cause larger outbreaks due to environmental changes. A strong positive relationship has been found between foodborne pathogen infections and changes in air temperature and precipitation in countries like Korea. And increases in daily temperatures are very likely to result in increased number of poisoning cases in temperate regions. And some of recently studies are also showing the intake of various foodborne pathogens through the roots of various plants. These are again a threat to the humans when they are consumed uncooked. Climate change and antimicrobial resistance is a growing concern because the increased average local temperatures increase rates of antimicrobial resistance of three human pathogens, three important pathogens, particularly the E. coli, the Klebsiella pneumonia, and Staphylococcus aureus. So a temperature increase of 10 degrees centigrade, along with an increase of 2 to 4% in the number of resistant infections resulted. Extreme weather conditions again enhances the spread of antibiotic resistant bacteria into the surrounding environment. But a lot of in terms of the climate change impacts on the occurrence of food contaminants, particularly in relation to the Indian context, these have a lot of relevance because abnormal weather conditions, particularly unseasonal rains and cyclones, have been frequently associated with high mycotoxin contamination and acute mycotoxin disease outbreaks. So all the 4 outbreaks that were documented from India resulted due to consumption of rain-damaged staple cereals, and all because of unseasonal rains, and they are thought to occur due to climate change effects. Even the recent rains, which Hyderabad has witnessed, has been shown to cause extreme crop damage because this is the time that crops are being harvested. So this damage can cause contaminants like mycotoxins to affect the food commodities. Then climate change impacts on environmental contaminants and chemical residues in the food chain. These are associated with PCBs and dioxin contamination of agriculture and pasture lands. There's increased occurrence of alternate floods and droughts to be which are increased occurrence of these floods and droughts are associated with release of arsenic and contamination of groundwater in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is known to have a high exposure to arsenic through rice because of the contaminated water. And the climate change will have different effects on the effects of plants, necessitating the use of higher unacceptable use of dose levels or more application of pesticides to protect crops. Changes in the incidence of foodborne zoonoses and animal pests resulting in increased use of veterinary drugs is also anticipated due to climate change. Because all these climate change effects which I'm showing are all the predicted effects. Some have been shown through modeling and some very few are direct observation, because the actual evidence linking climate change impact with the disease outbreaks is yet to be documented. Then coming to the next emerging food safety concern is food fraud, because fake foods or food fraud are also known as economically motivated adulteration. These are assuming really heightened concerns, particularly in developed countries, as well as in developing countries. So the greatest impact is on consumer confidence, because what is written on the label is not what it claims to be. This is the fraudulent addition of non-authentic substances or removal or replacement of authentic substances without the purchaser's knowledge for economic gain of the seller. This is the main point in fraud when you are comparing with food adulteration. So this has an economic gain and this is displayed on the label, but it is not authentic. So the adulteration of milk and protein powders with melamine is one of the examples. Melamine caused huge outbreaks in China and in various other countries like USA among children because of its toxic properties. Some more examples are in China, where you have imitation rice, fake pepper, imitation egg, etc. But the horse meat scandal in the European Union is the most deliberated, where in terms of food fraud cases. In USA, again, it is olive oil, honey, maple syrup, and vanilla counterfeits, cognac with brandy. These have been most reported. India, we have reported synthetic milk and a variety of adulterants, particularly non-permitted coloring agents in the foods. Foodborne viruses are emerging food safety concerns, as we are all witnessing now. So those viruses which are most frequently involved in foodborne infections are the norovirus and hepatitis A virus. Most of the foodborne disease burden, as estimated by WHO, concentrated on these two viruses. But you also have the human rotavirus, hepatitis E virus, and including coronaviruses and other viruses. These are occasionally transmitted via food, although their typical mode of transmission is different. The severe acute respiratory syndrome causing coronavirus and highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, there is very limited evidence of transmission of these through food. According to WHO, in fact, there is no evidence to date of viruses that cause respiratory illness to be transmitted via food or food packaging, because this was as a result of increased concern among consumers who refuse to accept any animal food because of the scare. This was a period of food crisis, a food scare of corona coming through food. But the main source of infection of these kind of foodborne viruses are the wet markets, because wet markets are extremely popular in China, where poor hygienic conditions are always present. Sometimes they're inevitable because both the live animals and dead animals are kept, but mostly live animals are kept here. Sometimes fresh produce is also sold in the wet market. So there's a lot of high potential of co-contamination, and there's frequent contact between humans and live food animals. So that is how the zoonotic viruses are transmitted to the human populations. So coming to the challenges of whole food chain management for food safety and quality. The food chain management, the whole food chain management depends on the extent of coordination between the various actors in the food chain, like the food producers, the manufacturers, the distributors, retailers, and other persons involved in the various process of food delivery to the consumers. Then the assessment of supply chain management and economics of prioritization and maintaining of logistics to consumer demands. This remains a challenge to the Indian food safety management system because of the extreme complexities of the food chain that we have. This is a very simple chart showing the routine operations in the food chain, starting from food production, harvesting, primary marketing, storage, distribution to various government programs, as well as retail, food industry, and finally to the consumer. So the food hazards, the source of food hazards can be at any point. If they start from production, they are carried over until they reach the consumer. So the whole food chain, food safety management is achieving or receiving more attention, and the international agencies are emphasizing the use of these kind of management approaches. So food safety is thus a shared responsibility. It's important the farmer implements good agriculture practices, which can bring down the food safety risk considerably. The processor, it's important to upgrade his facility and design system and documenting and maintaining of records. The food handler is the main the person who can become the source of foodborne diseases. So maintaining hygienic conditions are extremely important by the food handlers. The government has to create an environment, scientific, financial infrastructure, regulatory favorable for ensuring food safety, and also various capacity building programs for food handlers in order to maintain hygienic conditions. Then consumers demanding if they demand a safe food product, then automatically the food safety assurance will also increase because of the demands for safe food. Then the international developments on the emerging food safety concerns. Recently, the Codex Alimentarius Commission proposed draft guidelines on the management of biological foodborne outbreaks. So these address the preparedness, the detection, response, and recovery, with limiting the extent of such outbreaks from biological hazards from bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Then there's a global food safety initiative, mainly introduced by the International Trade Association. It's a private organization, but they brought in a new concept, certifying food safety culture. Now, food safety culture has a long-standing history in the Indian context. We already have a food safety culture. Now, this is gaining a lot of importance, especially the post-COVID, the COVID-19 scenario. And this is recognized as a significant challenge for food businesses to introduce a culture of food safety into their operation and create a behavior-based safety management system based on behavioral sciences of individuals and teams and how they are conditioned by their working environment. Then another aspect is harmonizing food fraud terminology. How do you define a food fraud? We have simply said economically motivated adulteration, but international surveys are being carried out so that the actual terminology is defined in order to again evolve guidelines or standards for food fraud cases. The recognition of effectiveness of food safety management system. This is being continuously emphasized by international agencies like the WHO and FAO. Particularly, the hazard analysis critical control point system is the most effective tool for managing food safety risk in the food chain. This has received much attention as well as utility in the food industry, but yet to reach the utility at the producer level, at the farm level, or at the small scale industry level, more than the organized industries. The prevention and preparedness system, like prerequisite programs, these are mostly the good hygiene practices and good manufacturing practices, which are important for reducing the food safety risk. So these are now being increasingly recognized for food safety management of the food chain. Then there have been developments in food safety governance. We have now a single food safety authority, the Food Safety and Standard Authorities of India, which is taking care of all the food safety issues within the country. Earlier, they were all dispersed, but now they are under a single window approach. And the FSSAI has introduced various initiatives, but of course, there are challenges that remain for their enforcement. Now, in the food safety governance, the risk analysis or use of risk-based approaches are now gaining a lot of acceptance. The risk analysis, which is introduced by the WHO, consisting of risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication, is a globally accepted framework to effectively manage, assess, and communicate risk in cooperation with diverse stakeholders involved. So the risk-based management of food safety, hazards, and foodborne diseases are important tools for food policy development. And there is now an increase interest, or rather acceptance, or evolving strategies to see alternative regulatory options. Co-regulation is the term used. So public-private partnership programs are being encouraged, particularly in the USA and in the Europe, because these are emphasized for increased assurance of food safety. Along with private sector, the food safety standards can be set, and both the government can provide the information necessary for handling the food safety risk, and the industry can set up an infrastructure, say for instance the detection of foodborne pathogens or detection of food contaminants can be done by the private sector. In fact, the FSSAI has recognized several laboratories in the private sector that have been certified by the FSSAI to analyze various foods that are being inspected by the FSSAI for various food contaminants. So So dealing with the emerging food safety challenges in a changing environment, what is the way ahead? So food safety challenges are attaining a new dimensions with increasing global supply chain, particularly in the food market. That's the term used now. The food market safety, the food safety in the food market is now be emphasized because food market has become largely global, where food can be produced at any part in the world. So because of this increasing global supply chains, the food safety challenges are increasing. A risk management framework taking the whole food chain approach for various food safety hazards and issues with documented policies and procedures needs to be involved to identify and prioritize food safety issues. So risk-based prioritization is extremely important, particularly in developing economies. And there's an urgent need in India to understand food safety risk to consumers using risk-based approaches, particularly in various activities in the food chain that are related to food safety for national importance. Then global burden of foodborne diseases is increasing. It's important to consider it as a development priority in developing countries. Foodborne diseases and their contribution to undernutrition in children are also important. Evidence needs to be generated on emerging food safety risks, such as the zoonotic diseases, which we are now witnessing in the food market. I think that's my last slide. So the message is like there are various emerging food safety risks in the food supply. It's important to be aware of them. It's important to address these issues, prioritize them, and evolve the prevention and control strategies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vasanthi, for alerting us on the increase in foodborne diseases burden in near future and throwing light on the risks on food safety due to environmental changes, including climate, farming practices, food fraud, etc. And the importance, the role the government is also taking in developing better policy through co-regulatory approaches. So the key is to look at shared responsibility at various levels from food production to the consumer for better food safe environment and to reduce the food safety issues that we face. Thanks once again for the wonderful message and suggestions and expert guidance on this issue, right? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
The third resource person for the day is Dr. Uma Chitra. So asking the audience to be a little patient, we have another important session coming up. And she will be handling the impact of COVID-19 on food security and nutrition. Dr. Uma Chitra is a Fulbright Nehru Scholar and has a teaching career spanning about 25 years. She is presently working as an assistant course coordinator for the MSc Applied Nutrition at the ICMR NI in Hyderabad. She worked as the head of the Department of Clinical Nutrition and Dietetics at Kasturba Gandhi College for Women from 1995 to 2019. She completed her PhD from ICRISAT and Professor Jayashankar, Telangana State Agricultural University in the year 1996. She is a recipient of many awards for her contribution to the field of nutrition practice. She received a Netherlands government fellowship for an international course on monitoring, evaluation, and impact assessment of food and nutrition security programs. She is also actively involved in extension activities and has published several popular articles in leading newspapers and magazines. She also collaborates with Kellogg's India and Nestle India to organize poster contests and events for spreading nutrition awareness among school children and college students. She is a fitness enthusiast and is a member of Hyderabad Runners. Welcome, Dr. Uma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karen. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I'll share screen now.
Yeah, sure.
At the outset, I would like to thank the Director of NIN, Dr. R. Hemlata, for giving me this opportunity. I also thank Dr. Maheshwar, Head Extension and Training Division, for giving me this opportunity, and also Dr. Sylvia Fernandez. It was so kind of her to suggest my name for this webinar. So today it gives me great pleasure to talk to you all on the impact of COVID-19 on food security and nutrition. Dr. Vasanthi has already spoken about the definition of food security. So what is food security? Food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious foods that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So the pillars of food security are availability. Food has to be available in a country to meet the needs of the population. Access. People have to have access. That is, they should be able to buy the foods. Stability. There should be a stable production of food all the time, and utilization. So there should be availability of food at the national level through domestic food production and import. At the household level, the ability to produce or have the resources to purchase enough food. And access, people should have physical, social, and economic access. Utilization, the actual consumption patterns must meet nutritional needs. This includes processing and storage, preparation, allocation, and consumption within each household. Availability, access, and utilization need to be stable, reliable, and consistent. The COVID-19 pandemic is a health and human crisis that is threatening food security and nutrition for millions of people around the world. Hundreds of millions of people were already suffering from hunger and malnutrition before the virus struck. Unless immediate action is taken, we may see a global food emergency. At the start of the pandemic, about 820 million people were identified as chronically food insecure. Latest data shows that the food security of 135 million people has been categorized as crisis level. This may double by the end of 2020 due to COVID-19. The number of children under 5 years old who are stunted remains at 144 million worldwide. That is more than 1 in 5 children. 47 million children in the world suffer from wasting. These numbers may rise because of the pandemic. 368 million children are missing school meals because of school closures. The COVID Am I audible?
Yes.
Audible. Yes, you are now.
Okay, 369 million people are missing school meals because of school closures. And the COVID-19 pandemic may push 49 million people into extreme poverty by the end of this year. I'm not able to move to the next slide.
Can you please check your internet connections, ma'am?
Okay. The connection is there. So now let's look at the impact of COVID-19 on food security. There are several ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting food security, but I have listed down 6 as the most important. Worldwide, there has been a slowdown in economies and food systems. Worldwide, there is a disruption of economies and food systems, but the poor will be at the greatest risk for food crisis. The lockdowns implemented in India and everywhere in the world has led to a complete shutdown of all economic activities except essential services. This has created an economic crisis and misery for the poor, with massive job losses and rising food insecurity. Second, border restrictions and lockdowns are slowing down harvests, and millions of seasonal workers are without livelihoods. This has also caused a constraint in transport of food to markets. So although people have been producing foods, there is no supply chain for them to sell their produce, and because there is no transport. Meat processing plants and food markets are being forced to close because of serious outbreaks of COVID-19 among these workers. Farmers have been burying perishable produce or dumping milk because of disruptions in supply chains and also because of poor consumer demand. As a result, many people in urban centers have no access to fresh fruits and vegetables, dairy, meat, and fish. There's also been a disruption of agriculture and supply chains because of a decline in available migrant labor. During the lockdown, we all have been aware of how migrant laborers could not go to their hometowns because they had no transport. So there was no transportation. Prices have declined for wheat, vegetables, and other crops, yet consumers end up paying more. The closure of hotels, restaurants, tea shops, sweet shops has led to a decline in milk sales. So unfortunately, the dairy producers have no way in which they can sell the milk that they are producing. The poultry farmers are also badly hit because of misinformation, especially on social media, that chickens are carriers of COVID-19. How does a pandemic affect diet quality? So because of the pandemic, people are not able to, their income levels have declined, as a result of which they are not able to purchase vegetables, fruits, and animal source foods because these are expensive. But these are the main source of essential micronutrients. So this has led to a breakdown of value chains with a shift to monotonous, nutrient-poor diets. The poor may purchase the cheapest calories to feed their families. We already are aware that in poor countries, calories from non-staple foods, which are nutrient-rich, like fruits, vegetables, milk, and eggs, are 10 times more expensive than calories from the staples like rice, wheat, maize, and cassava. As a result, vulnerable households will give up nutrient-rich foods. Fourth, maternal and child health will also be affected because preventive healthcare will not receive priority because healthcare providers, which means the doctors and nurses, they have been reassigned to COVID-19 responsibilities. As a result, the healthcare providers will not be willing to travel for non-essential services like immunization, nutrition counseling, and micronutrient supplement distribution. So there will be a decline in antenatal, neonatal, and essential maternal and child healthcare services. So this means that there may not be adequate distribution of iron folic acid supplements, vitamin A supplementation for children who require it, and also in developing countries, many children get diarrhea because of no access to clean drinking water. So during this pandemic, there is no supply chain to supply oral rehydration salts and zinc to prevent, treat, and control diarrhea. And also the ready-to-eat therapeutic food may not reach the malnourished children who actually need them. Plus, there's a decline in safe in-person treatment consultations because of the social distancing which has been implemented. Lastly, the lack of healthcare. Now, what has been happening is most of these healthcare workers and healthcare providers, they have been reassigned to COVID-19 responsibilities. So there has been a scaling back of efforts. There's no availability of healthcare providers for the people, like especially the women and children who receive them. And to make this worse, the scaling back of these efforts will coincide with the monsoon rains. And we all know that during the monsoon, the incidence of infectious diseases and acute malnutrition rises. So this COVID-19 pandemic has released what is known as a storm of eroded basic healthcare, lack of access to safe water, and sanitation and hygiene. Plus, because of the lockdowns and the disruption of supply chain, there has been a decline in dietary quality because there is no supply of fruits, vegetables, milk, and meat. So millions of children are now suffering from life-threatening disease and malnutrition. So when children get malnourished, this further weakens the immune system and may affect the body's ability to fight the COVID-19 infection. So these then are the 6 major ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic is decreasing food security and leading to food insecurity. So what should governments, planners, and bureaucrats across the world to do to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 on food security? The most important thing is to protect vulnerable groups, the women and children. How can we protect vulnerable groups? There are several ways. And from this slide onwards, I will start discussing the ways in which we can mitigate the effects of COVID-19. First, keep agri-food systems functioning. So it's very important that farmers and sellers, they should be allowed to sell their produce, even if they belong to the informal sector. In spite of the fact that it's important to implement social distancing and also to improve hygienic practices, it's important to keep the domestic and international food markets working. Second, support local food production. This is very important so that people have access to fruits, vegetables, and other micronutrient-rich foods, especially if they are produced locally. This will also increase employment opportunities for household labor, especially women, so that they can consume these foods. Third, we need to find innovative ways to stimulate the demand for nutrient-rich foods. So mobile phone messaging can be used to do this. So mobile phone messaging can be used to stimulate the demand. So people should be made aware of where they can purchase foods. Like, for example, if there's a farmer's market, for example, in Telangana, we have what is known as a Raitu Bazaar. So local producers come to that Raitu Bazaar, which is nothing but a farmer's market, and they sell their produce over there. So through this mobile phone messaging, there should be some way to inform people who live nearby that there is a sale of these fruits and vegetables, eggs, etc., so that they can come and purchase them. Also, we need to encourage proper infant and child feeding practices through the mobile phone messaging, optimal breastfeeding, etc., and also the importance of eating a diverse diet. Are there any safety nets to protect women and children from the adverse effects of the pandemic? Yes, there are 3. Social safety net programs are very important. Usually, when we talk about social safety net programs, the governments usually distribute cereals and staples at low prices. But this only leads to an increase in diet quantity, but not in quality, because people also need to eat fruits, vegetables, milk, meat, etc., to improve to meet their requirements of micronutrients. So these social safety net programs should be aimed not only to increase diet quantity, but also to improve diet quality. How can this be done? By cash transfers or voucher schemes linked to innovative food delivery systems in order to stimulate a demand for nutrient-rich foods like fruits, vegetables, milk, etc. Second, it's where governments across the world should invest in WASH during this pandemic. WASH is an acronym for the United Nations program, which is Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene for preventing COVID-19. So hand washing stations should be conveniently located in public places. Public announcements and mobile messaging is very important to raise awareness and to encourage people to practice hygienic routines. Third, it is very important to protect women and children. During this pandemic, there has been a lot of news in the media that there has been an increase in incidents of domestic violence. This is because of psychosocial stress and also because of social distancing. Therefore, women and children have to be protected through social protection and other relief programs, which need to prioritize women and children. So we need to find innovative ways to protect women in the context of prolonged social distancing. Basic maternal and child health services. We also need to ensure that there is no collapse of basic maternal and child health services. For example, the healthcare workers, the healthcare providers, they should continue to maintain both curative and preventive healthcare services. How can this be done? This can be done through remote consultations and nutrition counseling using mobile messaging or radio, and COVID-19 safe home visits and delivery of essential drugs and supplements wherever possible. So the key to meeting these challenges is to increase access to protective equipment for all healthcare workers, because we need to protect the women and children who are the providers of nutrition for a family. Also, we need to scale up community-based management of acute malnutrition. As already stated, during this pandemic, there's likely to be a rise in the incidence of acute malnutrition. Therefore, we need to boost up community level screening and referral of children with acute malnutrition. And we also need to make sure that there is an adequate supply of life-saving supplements. And also, there should be appropriate staffing and availability of protective equipment. So we need to have a regular monitoring and surveillance to assess the emergence of acute malnutrition among newly vulnerable populations. So it's not only the children who are already malnourished, but this pandemic is going to push more and more people into a malnourished state. So we need to protect newer people from getting into this malnutrition. At the heart of any social protection program is a food and nutrition assistance. So food and nutrition assistance is very important. People should, we need to protect food access for the most vulnerable by increasing their purchasing power. And also, wherever necessary, by directly providing food through government or community-based programs. So we have seen that during this pandemic, the government has tried to supply food grains at subsidized rates. And during the lockdown, many of the migrant laborers were also given meals free of cost. So food and nutrition assistance is very important. It's also important to support children who no longer have access to school meals because of school closures. This is one aspect which is really frightening, because so many, the midday meal program in India is the largest school feeding program in the world. Unfortunately, because of the lockdown and because of school closures, children are not able to go to school. But the government has to find some innovative way to make sure that these children get at least one square meal a day. The Kerala government has started a very innovative program where a meal is given to these children directly at the doorstep. So at household level, they are providing meals to school children who are missing out on the midday meals. Self-reliance policy, or Atmanirbhar. The government should focus on promoting local business and agriculture. So there is a saying, eat local, think global. So it's very important to encourage local food produce. Atmanirbhar Krishi is a self-reliant agriculture initiative in India. In this initiative, the public funds should be allocated to support local farmers and improve the supply chain so that local crops are accessible for all rather than imported ones. Very often, especially in urban cities, we see all kinds of exotic fruits like apples from New Zealand, kiwis from New Zealand, etc. So when you buy fruits which are grown in other countries, you are not supporting the local farmers. So it's very important to educate people about the importance of eating locally produced foods, because not only are they suited, when you eat something which is grown locally, it's better suited to our digestive system over here because it is grown over here. Also, we are going to support the farmers and ensure that their livelihoods are taken care of when we buy locally available foods or foods which are grown in our own country. So it's very important to encourage these farmers by purchasing only food which is grown locally and also educating everyone to do the same. Disaster relief package. The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown up a disaster of unforeseen expectations. Nobody expected in the world that today we would be facing a situation like this. Fortunately, in India, the government has been doing a lot to provide assistance to the people. So the government should implement special assistance package and policies for farmers and agricultural workers, because if the farmers are not able to sell the produce, then the food will not reach those who need them. So it's very important that farmers and agriculture workers are protected. This will benefit the primary sector. And this in turn will have positive impacts on other sectors of the economy and help to achieve the sustainable development goals. Then it's very important to invest in a sustainable future by using agroecology and sustainable food production. Food production has to be sustainable. So we need to use the right techniques in order to protect the climate and the environment. We need to move to food systems that are more resilient to future pandemics and that offer better protection for all. Investments in the COVID-19 response and recovery should meet the long-term goal of a more inclusive and sustainable world. Food systems should be gradually transformed so that they work better with nature and for the climate. We have seen how the torrential rain in Hyderabad has led to a complete disruption of life. For over 2 days, there was no access. Even people like us had no access to our workplace. We had no access to market. So imagine the people who belong to the low socio-economic status. So it's very important that our food systems are transformed so that they are in sync with nature and the climate. At the beginning of 2020, 135 million people faced acute food insecurity. By the end of 2020, this number could increase to 265 million. So therefore, I end by saying that the goal should be a food system that is in balance with the needs of the global population and the limits of our planet. That is very important. We need to think of the global population and also about our planet. At the end, I would like to state that it is very necessary now than ever before to end hunger and to make sure to ensure that to improve the health and well-being of all people on the planet. These are the references I used for my presentation. Thank you so much for a patient hearing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Uma, for the wonderful presentation and for taking us through the nourish and sustain aspects of the FAO theme, particularly during the COVID-19, the ways in which especially vulnerable groups like women and children are affected, and the requirement for an improved social safety net, and other ways to strengthen the food supply system to combat undernutrition, like encouraging remote messaging and protecting healthcare COVID visits and other necessities that you have highlighted. I think it is definitely useful for the audience here. Now, because of the lack of time, if all the speakers are around, we'll probably take one question or one or two questions at the maximum. So there is one question for Dr. Lakshmaya from Costa Ghosh, who's a participant. He has asked that if there are any special initiatives taken by the government or agricultural department of India for the food heroes that are farmers and workers during this COVID-19 circumstances. That is one question that one participant has raised.
It is a very good question, but this is only recommendation by FAO and other international organizations. We have to also treat farmers as a frontline, just like frontline workers, health and other people. But government directly, they have not taken any stand on that. But we don't know future if they may take also. We don't have any idea on any incentives and other things.
Thank you, sir. Moving on, we have one question for Dr. Vasanthi as well. It is from Kritika, who is asking how to take care of food poisoning or contamination in marine foods. Any suggestions from your end? If Dr. Vasanthi is around, I think I can see her.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Yeah, seafood always needs to be sourced from reliable sources where hygienic conditions are maintained. So, and also to look for those kind of species which are not poisonous, because there are some well-known poisonous seafood. But then it's important that you source them from a good source and not from ponds and lakes which have been not clean. So like freshwater fishes, it's important that the source of getting the fish is as safe as possible. I hope I answered your question.
I hope so too. Then there's also one more quick question, probably Dr. Uma, if possible, can answer, or if any of the speakers have any inputs they can give. Dr. Gorak Prasad has asked, how safe is food supplements available in the market, particularly during this COVID-19 situation? You're muted, ma'am. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, actually, when I was talking about supplements, I was talking about these multiple micronutrient powders, which are a very easy way for example, if there is an infant at home or a young child, when during times when fruits and vegetables are not available, these multiple micronutrient sachets can be sprinkled over the cereal of the infant. But unfortunately, the supply of these MNPs have been disrupted because of COVID-19. Plus, iron folic acid supplements and vitamin A supplementation, the procurement and distribution is affected because of the pandemic, because the healthcare workers have now been called to COVID-19 activities. That is what I meant when I spoke about supplements. It's about essential supplements, vitamin supplements, which have to be given to those who require, not to everybody. For example, if there is incidence of white hot spots or vitamin A deficiency in a village, then it's very important that children over there should get vitamin A supplements. But that is not happening now because the healthcare providers have been diverted to taking care of patients with COVID-19.
Thank you, ma'am. Because of lack of time, these are the questions that we would be answering, but you could always get in touch with the speakers and try to clarify your doubts in future. Moving on to the last part, which is the vote of thanks. I would like to thank Dr. R. Himlata, Director NIN, and Dr. M. Maheshwar, Head of the ET Division, for taking the initiative for the webinar. On behalf of the Director and Head of the Extension and Training Division, I also express my sincere thanks to the eminent speakers for delivering a timely talk with practical takeaways on the approaches we all need to take together to build a better food service system and dietary diversity, engaging at possible levels to cater to the vulnerable population groups. So we all have a responsibility at a very individual level as well as a collective level. I would also like to thank Dr. G.M. Subbarao, who is the head of the niche division at NIN, and his technical team for their continued support for the smooth conduct of this webinar, and also my colleagues for this well-coordinated webinar. Last but not the least, thanking the audience for being very attentive and for their cooperation in the smooth conduct of the webinar. Thank you so much once again for your time and patience. Thank the organizers as well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.